Welcome back to another episode of Bitfinex Talks. I'm your host, Ricardo Martinez. Today, I'm here with Matthew Liu, who's the co-founder of Origin Protocol. Matthew, how are you today?
Doing excellent, Ricardo. Thanks for having me on the show, and really excited to share what we're working on at Origin with your community.
Awesome. I'm super happy to have you on the show. And I want to let everyone know that you're one of the brave co-founders, because with a lot of these altcoin interviews that I do, they want them very controlled. People usually want to see the questions ahead of time, and you did not ask for that. So I want to commend you for that. Matthew, my first question is for the people that aren't familiar with Origin Protocol. What's the problem that Origin is solving, and what is the project overall?
Yeah, sounds good. So maybe I'll give a little bit of background information. So Origin Protocol, we started in 2017. So we've been in the blockchain space for quite a while and been through a couple different iterations of the market cycle. And so today, Origin is composed of actually two separate business units. The first of which is Origin Story, and Origin Story is has a value accrual and governance token, OGN, which is the main topic of conversation today, since OGN is being listed on Bitfinex. So that's the Origin Story product and OGN, and then we actually have a separate business unit, the OUSD business unit, and OUSD is Origin Dollar. I'll just touch upon it really quickly, since we'll probably focus on Story and OGN thereafter. But Origin Dollar is a yield-bearing stablecoin. We think of it as DeFi made simple. And so the idea with Origin Dollar is you just hold OUSD in your wallet, and it automatically and passively accrues yield from blue chip DeFi yield sources. And so just by holding it, Ricardo, let's say I send you 1 million units of OUSD. At the end of the year, you might have 1.1 million units of OUSD. It's a rebasing token that's pegged to the US dollar. And then associated with the Origin Dollar product is its own value accrual and governance token, OGV. So that's kind of the second side of the business. But given that we're talking about the OGN listing on Bitfinex, I'm sure you have some questions about Origin Story, which is our NFT platform. So our thesis there is NFTs are in their very, very early stages. It's going to be a market where we want to create the NFT infrastructure and tooling to allow many different projects, creators, influencers, brands to launch their NFT ecosystems. And so one of the ways I like to describe this is, like, if you think of like OpenSea, right? That's kind of like the eBay or Amazon model, right? Where NFTs are kind of all treated as equal class citizens, regardless of the project or the use case or the vertical. And we imagine a world where, yes, that continues to be, a very dominant form of NFT usage and trading, but there should also be the Shopify or Squarespace or WooCommerce model, where there are these more bespoke storefronts or use cases tackling specific verticals, specific projects. We think that there will be all different types of NFT ecosystems and marketplaces in gaming, real world assets, digital goods, of course, but the use cases are just starting to proliferate. And so we want to position ourselves as a infrastructure and technology provider to allow all different types of NFT projects and companies to use the technology to build their unique offerings over time.
That's a great overview. I actually do want to get into OUSD and stuff a little bit later in the interview. Recently, I saw that Origin Story was used to sell real estate in the real world, represented by an NFT token, which I found that extremely interesting. Yeah. Do you see a future for like more real estate transactions adopting these type of NFT sales? And then how is this enforced? Like, if you sell me a house and then you don't want to hand over the deed, like how does that play out?
Yeah, I love this question, and it plays really well into, I think, my earlier point about how specialized use cases are going to require specialized feature sets, right? And so for this real estate transaction you're talking about, we partnered with Roofstock and their Web3 subsidiary, Roofstock on Chain. For listeners that don't know, Roofstock is a unicorn real estate startup. They specialize in like single family home sales. And so their use cases for selling a multiple properties now on our platform as NFTs is going to be very, very different than, let's say, a PFP or Avatar NFT project, which is also going to be very different than a NFT artist that's selling digital art, right? And so in this case, we set up a marketplace on our technology for Roofstock on chain. And there are lots of commonalities with what you would see with like other marketplaces, but there were a couple notable differences too. And so the way this worked is the NFTs represent ownership of LLCs. And so for the LLC operating agreements, it literally has a line that says ownership of token ID X for smart contract address Y is the managing member and partner of the LLC, right? Then in turn, the LLC is used to purchase and wrap real estate. And so therefore, like having ownership of the NFT means you actually have ownership of the property. Now, real estate is a regulated market, right? There are different federal and state laws. And so there were some additional features that we put into place to allow for this, right? And so essentially what was created was almost like an allow list to use the marketplace, right? So this is something that OpenSea would never do, right? Because they have to treat all NFTs the same, once again. But in this case, Roofstock wanted to sell only their, or allow buyers and sellers to exchange only their NFTs on their bespoke marketplace. And so these buyers and sellers did have to go through a lightweight offline process to be verified for usage on the platform. And then our technology allowed for the allow list of these users and their wallets. And that's how we're allowing these users to participate in real estate sales on chain via NFTs, right? And so while most of Web3 is the ethos is around being totally permissionless and not doing AML and KYC, in the offline world, we do see that AML KYC is oftentimes a very big part of it, right? And as we see more real world assets, whether that's like real estate or commodities, or potentially even like securities like bonds or stocks come on chain, there's a pretty good thesis that a lot of these assets will be wrapped as NFTs on chain so that they can be traded, so that there can be higher liquidity. Potentially, these NFTs can be fractionalized. But again, because they're real world assets or regulated assets, in the case of equities or bonds, some of the feature sets are going to be different, right? AML KYC is just one that I mentioned, but there's also just like different ways of like, I guess like doing research on these assets, of trading these assets, of supplying the right metadata. Other NFTs in the future may have like redemption rights. Like if you have, let's say we're talking about like physical sneakers or handbags or Rolexes, right? Those can also be represented as NFTs in marketplaces and ecosystems that our technology powers, but they're going to have unique use cases. So you might burn your NFT, right, when you go and redeem your sneaker or your Hermes handbag, right? And so those are features that we can build for some of these partners that we're working with. That again, a vanilla marketplace, an aggregator marketplace like a OpenSea or Blur, they probably wouldn't be investing in those feature sets. And that's where we think that the Shopify model of approaching NFTs is a very real and hopefully a very empowering one that opens opportunities for a lot of businesses, brands, individual artists, etc. But they are going to require some of that like customization and different tooling.
It seems like Origin has kind of gone through a few significant changes over the last year. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're, we started 5 years ago, and our original thesis was really around, can we build a marketplace protocol that enables anyone to buy and sell anything on chain, and essentially enable like decentralized commerce, right? So I think there's still that hierarching like vision of like, how do we do that? When we first got started, NFTs weren't a big thing yet, right? And so we actually tried to build kind of like an end-all, be-all aggregator marketplace that allowed anyone to represent online or offline services and goods on chain, and it didn't work out really well. It was like a product that was too broad, served too many use cases, plus Web3 adoption was very, very low at that point. Now with Origin Story, we're able to kind of like revisit that thesis, but think about like the exchange of these goods and services and assets when they're wrapped as NFTs. there's like a common way for buyers and sellers to engage. There's interoperability, wallet support NFTs, and so that enabling technology and adoption, I think, has been crucial in some of the large and small product pivots we've made along the way.
Okay, cool. Thanks for explaining that. Since you brought up NFTs, you mentioned kind of like the niche aspect that Origin is focusing on in the NFT, the overall like greater NFT market. You also mentioned that Origin has kind of like extended the capabilities of NFTs. Can you kind of break that down for us and let us know like what kind of unique improvements that Origin protocol has enabled that's different than the standard vanilla NFT experience?
Yeah, sounds good. So maybe like one slight tangent here, but the way I see NFTs is like they're this fundamental new primitive, right? I liken it to how like HTML was hugely transformative in the first wave of the internet. And at first, like HTML web pages were ugly and like it was like inline CSS, and people didn't understand why you needed an HTML web page, right? And it's like, well, I can call my friend, right? I can listen to the radio, I can watch the TV, I can read a newspaper, I can go to the store and buy stuff. And then a couple of years later, it's all of a sudden like, oh wait, there's this new sub industry powered by HTML web pages called blogging, and there's another one, social networking, and there's e-commerce, and there's all these different things that blossom out of the ability to put content online as an HTML web page, right? And so NFTs to me are kind of like in that early stage right now, right? And so there's some standards, right, like the ERC 721 standard or 1155 standard, or alternate chains have their own different standards. And I think to me, those standards represent kind of like the same thing as HTML did, 20 years ago, right? And so the standards are important because it allows for interoperability, it allows for wallets to display NFTs, allows for exchanges to allow the buy and sell of NFTs. But when you look at the NFT as this kind of fundamental primitive, it's really just a blob of code that references other things, right? And it can reference an image, right? If it's digital art, right, which is kind of what kicked off the NFT craze in 2021. It can, in the case of Rootstock, represents ownership of an LLC, right? So there's an actual legal agreement that's referenced in the NFT. In gaming, all right, the NFT, can represent a digital sword or avatar or whatever it might be, right? And so I think what we're trying to do is like help build out all these like other use cases, or not all of them, but like do our work to enable some of these different use cases, right? And so the Rootstock thing is one thing that we've done that's quite innovative, selling real estate as an NFT. We've also done stuff where we've worked with celebrities and influencers where the NFTs become like access passes or almost like raffle tickets. So Paris Hilton is an investor and advisor in Origin. She did a NFT drop with us last year, and we did one of like the more like mainstream style drops, right? We allowed people to purchase NFTs with credit cards. There were Polygon NFTs that were selling for $11, which is like, quite a discount to a lot of the NFTs that were selling at that time. And these were essentially almost tickets to her ecosystem, right? So certain NFT holders were entered into drawings, and people literally were able to get on Zoom with her, right, or got follows on Twitter with her, or I think even there were 11 people that were invited to her home in Beverly Hills, right? And so this is like kind of a use case that is being explored by us that's different than the PFP, Bored Ape use case, right? Now, of course, we have a bunch of partners that are in that space. Pudgy Penguins, one of the blue chip PFP NFT projects, is one of our partners, and we're building some bespoke tools for them. So if you look at the marketplace we've launched for Pudgy Penguins, there are a couple of like differences between what we're doing and let's say like OpenSea is doing, right? So the Pudgy Penguins marketplace is hosted on their own site, so it's marketplace.pudgypenguins.com. The only NFTs listed are the official NFTs from their collections. The branding is all Pudgy custom, right? So everything has that unique to the brand feel. And then we're working on a host of like additional like social engagement features around these NFTs, right? So you'll see an extensive like data analytics dashboard just for the Pudgy Penguins collections on the same micro app, if you will, right? And we're working with them on other ways to discuss, how is their IP potentially going to be used? And as they do merchandise, like how does that display that experience, right? And so I just use that as like one example of like going deeper with these NFT partners to help them bring their use cases to their collectors and community and traders. And I think these are some of the innovations that we're going to continue to see and are going to be important if NFTs are going to break into more mainstream use cases. There's another partner we're working with. I mentioned the use case of doing like NFTs that are burned and redeemed, right, for tickets. And so that's something that we've built into our technology platform so that they can just turn that on for their marketplace and their ecosystem. But that's not going to be, what's on the Pudgy marketplace, and that's not going to be what's on the Rooftop marketplace, right? And so again, one of the things that we're trying to do differently here is using that same base construct of NFTs that adhere to these standards that can proliferate in Web3 wallets and exchanges and things like that. How do we go deeper for specific use cases for specific partners in a scalable way, right? We're definitely not an agency, right? We're trying to build a technology platform that enables people to turn these use cases on for themselves. But how do we enable all these different, I guess, like real world or practical use cases beyond just buying and selling for like investment purposes?
I'm glad you mentioned the celebrity thing because I was going to ask you about that. You brought up that you partnered with celebrities. You brought up Roofstock, which is a unicorn company. But one of the real interesting things about Origin Protocol is it allows anyone to kind of launch their own marketplace, and they don't need to know how to code or anything like that. Have there been any community-driven marketplaces that have seen overwhelming success?
I think we have seen like I guess like a fair amount of success at like kind of like the head, right? Like the famous celebrities or brands and things like that, right? Like we helped do Blau's 11.7 million music NFT launch that kind of helped kick off NFT Spring in 2021. We've also done some kind of like surprising things, like we helped a whiskey cask company break a record for selling for selling like I think it was like $2.3 million as a whiskey cask. And so that's kind of tying in with the real world assets thing. So that was kind of a surprise. We did like a few viral video drops, like Charlie Bit My Finger was one that we did. And then there have been stuff that's kind of like more long tail that's been interesting and surprising from like NFT artists and things like that. We are in the midst of doing a bit of a kind of like retooling of our platform to figure out how we can be even more permissionless and scale even more openly at the moment. And so I'm really excited about the possibilities of kind of the unknown unknowns happening and kind of like, these grassroots successes that we hope that will pop up in the next 3 months, 6 months, year.
Cool. I do want to switch the subject and talk about the OUSD stablecoin. You mentioned that it gives a yield to people that hold it. How is it different from standard stablecoins that people know of, like Tether or USDC or BUSD?
Yeah, so we see it as very complementary, and we're very thankful for Bitfinex for kind of like leading the charge with USDT and making stablecoins, kind of like the de facto way of transferring value on chain, right? And so today we see that the largest stablecoins like Tether, USDC, DAI is the largest decentralized stablecoin, have gotten quite a bit of adoption. And so we see OUSD as complementary and additive. And actually the way you use OUSD is you take your USDT or USDC or DAI, and then you place it in the OUSD vault, right? And then get OUSD in exchange. OUSD is a rebasing stablecoin. So what that means is like the unit of account will change. And so again, that's how we're able to, let's say like I send you, 1,000 units of OUSD and you're earning, let's say a 10% yield at the end of the year, you're going to have, 100 more units of OUSD, right? On the back end, what's happening is like you're backing collateral, these other stable coins, USDT, USDC, DAI, they enter a strategy vault. And through decentralized governance and some smart contract automation, this backing collateral is then placed in blue chip DeFi strategies. So that could be Aave, it could be Convex, and or Curve via Convex. It could be Uniswap, it could be Compound, etc. We have some newer strategies like Morpho. But the idea is like the safest strategies for stable coins high security, high longevity ways to get yield. And then what happens is these smart contracts automatically deliver yield to your wallet and other users' wallets. It does rebalancing and rebasing multiple times a day because of the amortization of gas costs and kind of like the economies of scale. When you aggregate capital, we're able to get higher yields. And so what we found is like we're able to return higher yields with OUSD than if you're directly putting money into a compound or Aave yourself, right? And so there's a superior yield to OUSD coupled with higher convenience. You don't have to spend all your time as a yield farmer staking, unstaking, using a spreadsheet to monitor strategies. The protocol all does that automatically for you. And so, yeah, we're just excited about making DeFi easier for people to use and more accessible, especially with some of the centralized finance blowups in the last year, right? We saw, BlockFi, Celsius offer, pretty healthy yields to consumers, but what they were doing on the back end was lending it out to counterparties that were then doing other nefarious activities, right? The best example of which was FTX, but there were also some market makers that became illiquid or insolvent. We saw 3AC, the renowned hedge fund, blow up despite having an AUM of $18 billion at one point. And so I think that's hurt CeFi in many instances. Obviously, like, top exchanges like Bitfinex or Binance or Coinbase remain solvent and have, moved to like a proof of reserve system. And I think people are going to continue to use these products for, years and years to come. But this is our way of offering DeFi yields in a self-custodial way, right? OUC is always sitting in your wallet. It's not sitting on a centralized exchange or a centralized lender. Everything is transparent on chain. You can see where the capital is. You can see what the real-time APYs are. And you can literally see the units of OUSD increasing multiple times a day. And so for those users that want DeFi, but without the hassle, it's really quite an ideal product.
Forgive me if this question is kind of out of left field, but we saw it with Terra, which was a well-known stablecoin, like a huge implosion, which kind of kicked off the crypto winter. How is OUSD kind of preventing a similar situation from happening when you're paying out these high yields?
Yeah, love the question and the opportunity to provide some clarity there. So fundamentally, the two products are very, very different. At a surface level, there are some similarities around, hey, they're both stable coins, and the idea is to return yield, right? So Terra was an algorithmic stable coin that didn't have any real backing besides like the protocol itself, right? It used its minted out of thin air tokens as collateral backing, right? And so that ecosystem went through a death spiral because the backing collateral was essentially, as it became worth less, it meant that UST, right, was unable to hold peg. And as it was losing peg, then that meant that the backing collateral was losing even more value. So both were going down. And then that created this vicious death spiral that destroyed tens of billions of dollars of market cap in, I think it was like a day and a half, right, which is insane, right? And people lost everything. So that was catastrophic. And I think that shows the danger of algorithmic stable coins that aren't backed, that are generating basically like artificial yield, right? Yield that is manufactured out of nowhere. OUSD, on the other hand, is backed by the top three stable coins, right? USDT, USDC, and DAI. USDT, as you're well aware of, is backed by US dollars and a small amount of like commercial paper. But some people might FUD Tether, but I have a strong belief that you guys know what you're doing and that it's a very, very solvent product, right? And USDC has similar guarantees. You can redeem one-to-one for the US dollar from Circle and fully backed, right, by dollars. DAI is actually over collateralized, right? So you back that with ETH or other collateral at this point, but the collateralization ratio is like actually higher than the amount of DAI that you're able to mint. And so it's an over collateralized situation. So all of these assets at minimum are one-to-one backed with US dollar, if not higher, right, in the case of DAI. And those are the assets that are used by OUSD. And in contrast to Terra, again, purely algorithmic, backed by magic internet money, susceptible to depth spirals, and the yields that were being printed by Anchor, which is the yield generation protocol in that ecosystem. It was all made up, right? Here, the yields are real, right? People are borrowing and lending on these different platforms and generating protocol fees. People are swapping on Curve and Uniswap, generating trading fees. Yes, there's some amount of reward tokens emissions, but that's not the entirety of the yield. Again, the most important thing is that OUSD is backed by real collateral, and so there isn't that chance of this crazy algorithmic death spiral. So compared to UST, it's orders of magnitude safer and more secure. It may not be as sexy in the sense that it's not an algorithmic stable coin that can create this like multi-billion-dollar ecosystem overnight, but it's like a reliable, safe product that we think will have already has had way more longevity than UST, but we think will have way more longevity in the future as well.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Can you kind of discuss the tokenomics and issuance of OGN, and then also how that interplays with OGV and the OUSD coins as well, like within the Origin ecosystem?
Yeah, sounds good. So yeah, both projects, Origin Story, the NFT platform, and Origin Dollar, OUSD, are within the Origin ecosystem, but they do have two separate tokens, right? So OGN is the value accrual and governance token for the Story platform, and OGV is the value accrual and governance token for OUSD. The original linkage in tokenomics was like we started with OGN. And so when we came up with OGV, we airdropped a portion of OGV to OGN holders. So there's a shared holder base, shared investor base, shared community, et cetera. And the two tokens also have, similar utility in the sense that they're used for value accrual as well as governance, right? So like Origin Story, you stake OGN on the Story platform. And then as the Story platform earns fees, right, primarily like ETH trading fees, but also we throw in some OGN staking rewards, those OGN stakers can participate in that upside, right? And so on the OGV side, OUSD as a protocol, again, is earning yield automatically and passively. And so as yield is earned, a portion of that yield, currently it's set at 10% through decentralized governance, goes back to OGV holders in the form of OGV buybacks and then OGV staking yields. There are some differences between the two tokens as well. So OGV uses the V token model, so VEOGV. When users have OGV, they can vote, escrow it, or effectively stake it for voting and economic privileges, participate in decentralized governance, and then also get that bonus yield. And then OGN does not use like the VE token model, at least not at this juncture. I would say that we're like highly motivated working on both of these projects within our larger ecosystem and seeing solid traction on both projects. OGN is probably a little bit more mature since it was our original token and is listed on a bunch of exchanges, including now Bitfinex, which we're super happy about. And then OGV is our newer token, slightly lower market cap, but is starting to gain traction as well across a number of centralized exchanges as well as decentralized AMMs. And so, yeah, we think there's a lot of potential in both tokens and their underlying products, and the growth trajectories for where both can go in a couple of years, I think is like very, very optimistic in my mind.
We're at the very beginning of 2023. It's February right now while we're doing this interview. Yeah. You guys have made it through the majority of the crypto winter. It's starting to look like the bear market may be coming to an end in the very near future here. Yeah. What can the Origin community expect from the Origin protocol for 2023?
Yeah, so I think our cultural tenets are the same since 2017, which is just like build for the long term, right? Deliver real value, and deliver that value before you try to capture that value. And so we're just very focused on solving real customer pain points, addressing use cases. Yeah, the product roadmaps for both projects are very exciting. We're excited about, like you mentioned, the market seems to be recovering, right? And so that has pretty large ramifications on our product offering, right? 2022 was definitely a bit tougher because DeFi TVL crashed and DeFi yields also crashed. Meanwhile, real world interest rates increased, right? And have continued to increase, but they're starting to hopefully be tapered, right? And that means DeFi will be more competitive again. And so I think that's just automatically going to give a boon to OUSD as a product, and consequently the performance of OGV, both in terms of like governance and value accrual. And I think the community has a lot to be excited about there now that the market inflection point is turning. And similarly, on the story side, we saw a huge swell in NFT minting and trading in 2021 that kind of fell off the face of the earth in 2022 with the collapse, right? But in the last 2 months, we've seen a resurgence of activity. It's nowhere near where it was in 2021, but people are minting NFTs, they're coming with new use cases, exchange trading volume is increasing. And so these are all like positive macro factors for our Origin Story product as we go out and work with more and more partners and launch more of these marketplaces and ecosystem tools. Like rising tide raises all ships, right? And I also think that this juncture of the market will be more about NFT utility and use cases versus the last one, which is probably more speculation oriented. And so I think that's where our tooling, right, our products, our APIs, our infrastructure can really start to shine, right, and showcase how they're differentiated from other providers in the market as this new NFT, kind of like the next wave of NFTs comes to fruition, probably sometime this year or maybe latest like sometime early next year. I do think we're going to see some pretty big transformations in how NFTs are used.
Okay, cool. I'm actually really glad you brought that up because I wanted to ask you, like, with the explosion of NFTs in 2021 and then kind of the collapse in 2022, we've seen a washout. Like people were just kind of throwing NFTs on any kind of use case and not really thinking it through. Like now that NFTs might resurge in a more resilient way, like which use cases for NFTs do you see as like having the most potential?
That's a great question. I guess I'll do a little bit of a cop out and go back to my answer to that. I think there are a lot of unknown unknowns that I'm particularly excited about. Just like when HTML was first invented, I don't think Tim Berners-Lee could have predicted social networking or e-commerce, at least in its current form. And so I think there's a trajectory that I won't be able to fully predict. And so that's the most exciting. Just kind of like seeing what will evolve over time. But more concretely, I do think that NFTs, NFTs, are easiest in the digital realm, right? And that's why we saw art and collectibles take off first. But I think the next wave that's really promising, I think, is going to be in gaming, right? So we already have seen, tens of billions of dollars generated every year from in-app purchases from the Apple App Store or Google Play, right? And there are many compelling reasons why a lot of these digital items and in-app currencies should become interoperable with NFTs in the near future, right? And so imagine taking a skin or an avatar and playing a game with it, but then being able to, in a couple of years, put on your Apple AR headset or your Meta like VR experience and be kind of the same avatar, right? And have that digital identity be portable across platforms. So I think that's going to be a hugely lucrative area. I do think the real world assets play is going to be super fascinating. There's a lot more hard work in terms of like, hey, what are some of the offline processes? There's by nature going to be some level of centralization when you're dealing with like off-chain stuff. So I think that it'll be a little bit slower to evolve, but I think it'll be a massive, massive market, right? Going back to the roofstock, I think at some point, uh, real estate NFTs can replace like real estate investment funds, right? And people will be able to invest in property, that they fractionally own as an NFT. Maybe that property is uh, across the world and they've never even visited it. Maybe they are able to create a portfolio of property rather than putting it down on all one house. And so this tokenization of real world assets that NFTs enable, I think, is going to be huge. It's going to increase liquidity. It's going to increase global access to capital. So I think that's going to be super, super exciting as well. And then I think maybe another category that we're not focusing on as much at Origin, but we do think is going to be quite large is NFT ticketing. The current ticket providers, they, they are predatory, right? The fees charged by Ticketmaster or StubHub for secondary sales is insane, right? And they are kind of like the gatekeepers. And at some point, NFTs will replace these traditional tickets and allow for permissionless open resale. It'll help curtail some like the scalping problems, I think. If you use NFT royalties, then the people that are performing at concerts or sporting events or whatever it may be, they're able to like participate in that follow-on trade, right? And so I think that creates incentive for all these venues and performers to get into the NFT game. It's going to take a bit of education, but it certainly creates a financial incentive for them to adopt the technology.
Thank you for that insight. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you think it's important for our listeners to know about Origin Protocol?
Yeah, I think one of the main things is just that, like, we're here in the long term, right? We've been in this game for a while, right? We've had to weather multiple market cycles now. So not only the crash of last year, and we're still here, and we're going to be here for hopefully many, many, many years. But we've also weathered the 2018, 2019 bear market, right? And so we're committed to this Web3 future. And we're committed to delivering real value to solve real world problems with our technology. We are, we've very much embraced like all the innovation that's happening in Web3 across many different projects, and love to partner with complementary partners, whether they're like NFT projects or DeFi protocols. We love engaging with many different communities. Our community is regional and worldwide, and we're very thankful that we have such a strong community and want to continue reaching out to the community, engaging them, and leveraging them in a way too, right, to get the word out about what we're doing. Just like overall, feeling quite fortunate and optimistic about the future, especially as we're now coming out of this very, very steep market correction of last year, and there's light at the end of the tunnel. And I think us, as well as many other developers in the space, right, we're still here, right? And developer activity and building products is a leading indicator of real adoption, and then obviously like value creation within Web3. And so I would say for all the listeners out there, keep believing in this Web3 future, keep believing in how the technology is going to transform businesses and empower consumers, empower those that are not banked, kind of change the way that governments and organizations operate, right? There are going to be so many paradigm shifts to look forward to. We're thankful to be part of the journey and want to do as much as we can to put our dent in the universe.
Okay, awesome. One of Origin's main focuses has been the community. So for our listeners that are interested in participating in the community, how can they do so? Like, where can they find you on social media? Do you guys have a Telegram? Can you give them all the links and necessary information?
Yeah, absolutely. Our kind of like corporate website is originprotocol.com. And then the actual two business units and products, they're story.xyz and then OUSD.com. There's a lot of information there. Within our communities, we have a Discord, right? So if you just go to originprotocol.com /Discord. It'll automatically route you to join our Discord. We have Telegram channels in, I believe, like a dozen different languages and regions. We're becoming more active again in terms of meetups and visiting different countries and participating with the community in that way. And so, yeah, there's a lot going on. If you're interested in engaging with me personally, you can follow me on Twitter, Matthew Liu, or send me an email, matt@originprotocol.com. And of course, the Origin official Twitter is just Origin Protocol on Twitter as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for accepting the interview and coming on the show and letting me batter you with a bunch of questions.
Of course, it's always a fun time, and love engaging with wonderful communities like the Bitfinex community. So pleasure is all mine.